So we're going to start today with Luis Hernandez. So I'm going to have you come up here. I just want to tell you a little bit about Luis before we start. So he is part of the C-STEP program, which is the New York State Collegiate Science Technology Entry Program. And he applied to the internship because he wanted to learn more about the Holocaust, and he expressed regret to me that he didn't learn more about it in his studies previously. He also wanted to learn new skills about how to interview people, practices that he thought would be helpful because he wants to become a physician eventually, and he's on his way to this career. He actually, I was looking through your resume again, and he had an internship at Columbia University Medical Center, so I thought that was really wonderful. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Luis.
Okay, well, I want to start off by giving thanks to Dr. Flew and Ms. Berman for allowing me to be part of this internship. And I started learning about this internship, about the Holocaust when I was actually in high school. But in high school, we didn't really learn about it that much because, you know, they teach it to you probably like 2 or 3 days, but you don't really get knowledge about it. So it was really here when I took a history course during the summer that I learned more about the Holocaust. But then even in this course, we specifically spoke about Hitler's life opposed to the actual Holocaust. So then when my advisor actually told me about this internship, I thought it would be a great opportunity to come here because then I can actually learn about the Holocaust from the perspective of a survivor opposed to the perspective of just reading it from a historian's views in a book. And my survivor I interviewed was Ethel Katz, and she was from Eastern Poland at the time. And her story actually made me realize that there were people suffering from the Holocaust that wasn't just the gas chambers, because all we hear about is Hitler's rule, people dying in the gas chambers, but what about the other people that are suffering? She wasn't even in Germany, she was in Eastern Poland, and she was still being affected by it. And that's actually crazy, because I never knew that people outside of Germany were actually suffering from this. So I thought that was pretty crazy. And she had a pretty big family, just like me. She had a twin brother, she had 2 little twin brothers, she had an older sister, and she also had her mother and father prior to the war. That was what her family was comprised of. And when I spoke to her, she actually told me about how her life was just normal before the war. She went to school, she had friends, she used to play soccer. She even told me that she was a great goalie, and they used to argue about whose team she would be on. So that really goes to show a lot how her life just changed drastically the minute the war started. So she told me that Hitler's army came in July 5th, 1941, and everything changed for her. Because for the first 3 days, the local Ukrainians, they started throwing away the holy books. They started killing the Jews. And then that's really when all of her traumatizing events started, because she told me that before any of this started, she was actually told about it, but she couldn't believe it. Because if somebody told you right now they were murdering your people, would you believe that? Until you actually see it, you will start to believe it. So yeah, once the war started, they rounded up all the men in the town, and they took her brother, and her brother was actually gunned down. That was the first person she lost in her family. And then a year later, the destruction of the Jews was actually sped up. That's when the Latvian soldiers were brought in, and they were hunted. And some of them were sent to labor camps, to gas chambers. They were just killed in the streets. And she was telling me how she had to hide in haystacks and ditches, and she was always on the run and scared for her life. And she told me that people think that Jews were just killed, but that wasn't really what happened, because she told me that Jews were fighting back. They wanted to die with respect and dignity, so they didn't just die like that. They actually fought the soldiers, they died with honor. And she told me how when she was in the city, her home, she saw corpses everywhere. There was blood everywhere. It was like really traumatizing for her. And she told me that most of her time she wasn't even home. She was just getting assisted by other people. That there were kind people. Like, you would think that it's almost all the Russians and all the Germans that wanted the Jews dead, but that's not necessarily true. There were people that risked their lives to actually help her. So the one that stood out to me the most was when she told me about this Polish guy and his wife, how they took her into their home. And like the only reason they had to leave was because the Polish man's wife actually was having an argument with a neighbor over an inch of land. So the neighbor got upset and told him, yeah, well, you're hiding Jews in your backyard, in your house. And that was really messed up. So they had to leave because they were afraid of being discovered. And they were actually fortunate because her little brother found an attic in a little shack where children used to play. But then they also left because if there's children every day there, they had fear that they would be caught. So then they ended up going to an abandoned house, which they stayed there for a while, but they had to leave because the owner came back and was like, oh my God, what are you doing here? So then they left, and then they ended up just going back to their city home because they really had nowhere else to go. But when they went back to the city home, they realized that there was like almost no houses, and they were lucky that their house was one of the few houses that was still standing there. But unfortunately, they were also discovered there. And she told me about how they were trying to escape when the soldiers came, and her dad was pushing her and her siblings out the window. And she started running, but she was struck in the head and fell to the floor. And when she woke up, she saw a soldier's boots. So she just closed her eyes. And the soldier didn't really kill her, and I think it's because since she was hit in the head, she was probably bleeding severely, so he assumed she was just bleeding to death. So he just let her lay there bleeding. And her family wasn't actually lucky because they were all caught and they were also gunned down. And after this, I believe she told me she met a young boy that actually took her to his house so she can stay with his family for a while. And she told me how this was like one of the sweetest young men she's ever met because he helped her bury her family with a proper burial. And he told her that it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you're from, everybody deserves a proper burial. So soon after, because she can't stay with them for a while because there was always people hunting her, she ended up finding a false wall in an attic, so she'd stayed there for a while. Like for 3 months, I believe she'd stayed there, 3 or 4 months, without food and water. I mean, she did get water because there was a time where the house she was in was occupied by soldiers, and she had got out to get water and went back to the attic. She was fortunate that they left long enough for her to get water to survive that amount of time, even though she was starving.
Yeah, Louis. Yeah. Let me ask you a question. You've met Ethel, and I've known her for about 7 years, and an amazingly dynamic woman. You look at her today, and she's about this tall, a little old lady, and you suddenly realize that that when you are looking at these people, I always would tell the interns, when you interview someone, you're not looking at someone who's 80 or 90 years old. You're interviewing someone who was your age 70 years ago. So you look at that person. What is the most important thing you're going to remember about Ethel?
Well, I mean, I wrote it here so you guys can all see it. Hatred is lethal. That's what she really wanted me to get out of it, because that's the only reason all of this happened, because of hatred. It wasn't just for fun or for the hell of it. Yeah.
Okay, could you hold that up again, because we got to get this on. That becomes very important. It's amazing, and you're all going to go through this experience when youth had, but when you see the survivors come in here, we have a survivors meeting, you're going to say it's a grandma and grandpa's club. Everybody is walking in that way, but they were your age at that time, younger when this was happening. So, Louis, what I'd like to do, we have something, we always go ahead and present to our interns a citation. This is a unique citation. And Gloria, would you like to come up? One of the survivors who used to be part of our survivors, who unfortunately died 2 years ago?
Last year.
Last year, a year ago, was one by the name of Sally Sachs. And she was friendly with every one of the survivors you have met. But a very, very dynamic woman. Unfortunately, she became sick and passed away, but her family got together and they have gone ahead and donated to the Kupferberg Holocaust Center funds to continue this internship project. And what we have here is the internship, and I'll give you a copy of this so you can have your own. It says the Sally Sachs Memorial Internship Project presented to Louis Hernandez, and even you see a picture of Sally on there. And I knew Sally. Sally was one of the toughest women I ever met. I always had the feeling that if Sally came into this room right now and sat down at the table and put her arm up like this and said, "Come on, Arthur, let's see if you can push my hand down, I'll arm wrestle with you," she'd probably win. She was that powerful. So we'd like to present this to you. And smile for the camera.